What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to talk about the finale to Season 1 of 1899 from filmmakers Janche Frichet and Baran bo Odar. And if you do not want spoilers, this is not the video for you. I posted a video a couple days ago reviewing the first 6 episodes, which is completely, totally spoiler-free, just giving my initial impressions. But this video is for people who have digested the last few minutes of episode 8. And I'll just give you a few seconds to click off the video if you don't want to hear more. All right, so if you're still here, let's get into it. I had a very interesting morning watching these last 2 episodes because the entire time I kind of ruined the experience, constantly worrying that somehow that the show, that it would not stick the landing. And I was like, oh my God, I'm getting nervous. I was just getting nervous that it would disappoint or leave a bad taste in my mouth, or that things that were frustrating me wouldn't be explained, or that just somehow that there wasn't enough time to wrap things up and put a nice bow on it in a way that would leave us excited for whatever's coming next. And I'm thrilled to report that I was totally wrong. Like, all those negative feelings were totally in vain. Or maybe that was exactly what the filmmakers were going for. But I should have trusted in the grand design, the method to the madness of this filmmaking team, because with the 3 previous seasons of Dark, they proved each and every single time that they are like the masters of mind-bending storytelling that takes us to very new places. And I'll get to some of those sources of frustration in a moment, even though most of them were totally kind of like alleviated or washed away by the power of the ending. But let's just talk about that ending. There was something truly magical about Mara looking at that screen, getting the message from her brother as Starman by David Bowie kicked in. And obviously every single episode so far this season has ended with cool pop tunes, and some of them, more kind of on the nose than others, but I can't think of a better fucking song to wrap up the season. It also helps that I love the song Starman quite a bit. And if you've never seen the original music video for Starman, check it out. It's magical, beautiful stuff. But holy cow, here we are. 2099. It's a crew of 550 people. There are 1,423 passengers. It's a survival mission of some kind, and it's just this giant ship called the Prometheus hurtling through space. And who the hell knows? I mean, maybe the Earth has long since, outlived its ability to sustain life. Obviously, these filmmakers love exploring dystopian futures. They did so very effectively in Dark. I thought those scenes in the future in Dark were some of the most effective of everything. But wow, they're going to get to completely reinvent this whole landscape moving forward, because now that we know what the reality is outside the simulation, the big question is going to be, is this yet another dollhouse within a dollhouse? They kept going back to that metaphor in this final episode about, Plato's metaphor of the cave and how people are unable to perceive the reality beyond that. And let's say you want to say the reality beyond that is like a creator or a god. Well, then what's the reality beyond that? And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if we're looking at like windows into realities, into yet more windows into even like more different realities. I'm expressing that very clumsily, but you get the idea. Or who knows, maybe this outer space reality is the reality, the objective reality. And maybe her brother Kieran is this horrible, grand kind of plotter or schemer or villain who's been taking control over this whole mission while she's been locked away inside the simulation. There's so much that we don't know, but the good news is the ending just sealed it for me. All my reservations, all my concerns, the great majority of them were totally washed away, and suddenly I realized that I was once again in love with this show. And my love for this show, it's kind of gone through this tug-of-war experience throughout the season, where there's some episodes where like, oh my God, this is just a joyless slog. This is boring. This is going nowhere. Like, there's no grand design. Like, it's all vitamins but no flavor. And then I'll have moments where like, oh my God, now I see the grand design. Now I love it again. And I guess maybe that was part of their intention, to kind of like tease and deny and then frustrate and then reward. Maybe these filmmakers are just like master conductors manipulating the emotions of the audience. And if that's the case, Job well done, because I totally fell into their trap over and over and over again. But goddamn, I can't imagine any show that I'm looking forward to more than season 2 of 1899 or 2099 or whatever the hell they're going to call it. But there's one last concern that I have that is yet to be addressed. I do worry that the cast is too big and that they're not going to be able to figure out how to have a plot or storyline for all these faces and all these characters. And I felt like the first few episodes did a really good job of giving them all these fictitious, now that we know they're all fictitious backstories, and none of them can even remember how they got on the boat. But at that point, every character felt very important to the story. But as the season wore on, all these secondary characters, like they were either shoveling coal or just running around the ship trying to avoid rocks. But I could tell they very clearly had run out of things for these characters to do, whereas Mara and Daniel and their son and Mara's father, all those characters were key to the plot. It was easy to remain emotionally engaged in their different stories. And as Daniel started rewriting the code to the simulation and reality as they perceived it started to come unspooled, I did feel a complete, total, alarming lack of emotional engagement with their fates. Like the woman whose hand keeps getting darker and it's starting to creep up her neck. It's like, well, if it's not real, who cares? And when people are getting trapped and running and so on and so forth, I wasn't feeling, I guess, the thrill or the sense of danger or the sense of excitement. Maybe the show could have done a better job of trying to find a way to keep us engaged in all those stories. The reality is, all I really care about at this point is Mara, her son, her husband, her brother, and her father. That is the family dynamic. That's the emotional core of the story. So it'll be one of the big challenges for season 2, trying to find a way to rope all those other characters back in and giving them something important to do. And I have no idea if I would feel the same way if I were to watch this season for a second time, but I did start to find it a little tedious in episode 7 and episodes 8, just reusing that device again and again and again of showing people going through doorways, going through tunnels. And I was always like, where are you going? What are you looking for? Like I guess this whole season overall, it kept its secrets very close to the chest, much more so than in Dark. I feel like Dark would tease out a little bit more exposition and a little bit more information, whereas this season took a huge risk by keeping people completely, totally in the dark. I mean, the idea that Mara designed this simulation and that her father is as much a victim as anyone else, being completely trapped in the simulation, is great that they withheld that information as long as they did. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if a lot of people get really frustrated watching this season and just say, I don't know what the fuck's going on, and they just throw their hands up in despair and bolt. Because if I were to call attention to one advantage that Dark has over 1899, I think Dark did a slightly better job of, no matter what was going on in terms of the time travel and all these crazy concepts, every once in a while they'd give us a scene that was very grounded and very brutal and very rooted in real human experience. Like season 1, watching a man trying to beat a kid to death with a rock. I mean, it was one of the most horrific things that I've ever seen in a show ever. And it makes the audience immediately just kind of recoil in horror from what they're seeing. And I think what maybe the show could have done to kind of throw some red meat to the audience, where even if they are not following the show completely, if you want to keep them entertained, like give us a sequence of like, people's brains exposed and getting syringes going into them or something along those lines. But give us like some legit torture as opposed to just showing it in these like hyper quick little montages. And we do get some of those, but really allowing the audience to kind of savor some of the horrific details and the brutality that will keep them on the hook, even if they don't understand what's going on. Or just more shots of like the ship when it went into the whirlpool at the end of episode 7 and then emerging. That kind of stuff is like, it's otherworldly and mind expanding and so on and so forth. And so people are willing to remain confused and in the dark, but once again, you got to throw them a little red meat every once in a while to keep them on the hook. Because if someone like myself, who's a massive fan of these filmmakers, was feeling frustrated, I imagine somebody who's totally unfamiliar with these filmmakers will probably feel even more frustrated. And I guess one of the big problems I was feeling during episode 8 is that when you've got all these different characters who are speaking different languages, none of whom know what's going on, and they're all constantly asking, like, what's going on? This is crazy. starts to get repetitive. And at a certain point, you just need to have one giant exposition dump for everybody so that they'll all stop denying what's happening. They'll all stop saying this is crazy. I mean, when the captain basically got deactivated in the last episode, at that point, I was like, all right, well, at least I won't have to listen to him say this is crazy anymore, because emotionally, as the viewer, I'm way past that point. I need some information. I need some satisfaction. But one of the big mysteries that still remains that I find really interesting is, why was the simulation created for Mara's child in the first place? Like, are we meant to trust the idea that he was dying, he was sick, and that they created the simulation as a way for the mother, the father, and the child to remain together forever? I don't know if we can trust that or not, because it seems like everybody's trapped in the simulation. Like, why would she create a simulation to save her son, and at the same time subject everybody on else on the ship to the same simulations? So I don't know if that revelation about the child, if we're meant to take that at face value. And this is one of those situations where I wish, as somebody making a video about this show, I could say, I've got all the answers, watch my video and I'll tell you what it all means. I have a lot more questions than answers, and I imagine that was done very deliberately. And I eagerly look forward to hearing everybody's theories, everybody else's questions, and everybody else's frustrations. The big question is, did people enjoy the season? Because I do worry that a lot of this felt so dense and so mathematically complex that a lot of people are going to feel like, oh, this is almost like eating raw nutrition, but without any hot sauce or without any flavor to help the medicine go down. Is this show actually fun to watch? Or is it just interesting? Is it an interesting intellectual challenge trying to understand all the little hidden details? And I guess I'll have a better idea in like a few days' time if I'm still thinking about it, because I started recording this video the moment I finished episode 8. I didn't write anything down. I mean, I was writing some notes as I was watching, but I didn't really give myself a chance to formulate any real ideas or hypotheses, or what's the plural of hypothesis? I don't know. Because let's face it, this show does not deliver the kind of escapist fantasy that something like The Matrix does, where obviously in The Matrix it's a simulation, it's a construct, and they're operating within. And I don't know if this show's ever going to give Mara and the rest of the characters an opportunity to manipulate their lives inside the simulation, or if season 2 might abandon the idea of simulations entirely. Perhaps locking people into these simulations is the only way that their mind and body can survive whatever this long, hellacious journey is that the ship is embarking upon. It might be a situation where the Prometheus is going to be in space looking for a hospitable world for like 1,000 years, and the only way to keep the passengers alive is through the simulation. There's just so much that we don't know. Also, we don't even really truly know if Daniel and Mara can be trusted as the quote-unquote heroes of the story. Maybe Mara locked everybody into that simulation against their will, and as a way of studying the simulation to see if it was a viable way of trying to keep her son alive. Like like I said before, we have far more questions than we have answers. Or maybe Mara's the hero and Daniel can't be trusted, or vice versa. But it was interesting seeing how her father was set up as the big bad villain the entire season. And of course, it's easy to think of him as the villain after seeing his performances in shows like Game of Thrones or Andor. And huge shout out to actor Anton Lesser. He's been getting a lot of work over the last couple of years, and deservedly so. He's a fantastic actor. But in that, we were manipulated in believing that he was the villain of the story all season long, and then we learn he's just yet another person trapped in the simulation, trying to help everybody wake up and get out of the simulation. I think it's a good idea to kind of be skeptical of Mara and Daniel until we know more. So looking at the season overall in terms of what worked and what didn't, I do think it sticks the landing, and I do think the ending is so strong and so satisfying that it'll erase a lot of the concerns or reservations people have throughout the season. But it is a little cold, it is a little impenetrable, and some are going to say that this show spent so much time kind of navel gazing or going up its own ass that it kind of forgot to be an entertaining show. And I can accept that criticism, that perhaps this show should have just given us like some great like sex scenes or some great fight scenes, or just give us something that doesn't break your brain in two. That said, like, I do think the show redeems itself at the end. But if I start hearing people online expressing a lot of frustration and giving up on the show entirely, I'm not going to get that angry. I will understand their grievances. And I think one of the big challenges for a lot of viewers is going to be remaining emotionally engaged with Mara's story up until she finally wakes up. It is frustrating when a character has no idea what's going on, when they're constantly confused, when they're constantly in the dark, and everybody else seems to kind of know what's going on. Once again, this is a show that's going to test people's loyalty and test people's interest. And if you make it to the end, it's worth it. But goddamn, you got to do a little bit of work. But in closing, I do want to reiterate something I said in my spoiler-free video, and that is that Janche Frichet and Barenboe Odar are some of the only filmmakers in the world right now who are working in genre, who are working in science fiction, who are working with suspense and horror and thrillers, who are really making a pronounced effort to give us new concepts, new stories. In an era of complete and total risk aversion and creative bankruptcy, it's incredible to me just how successfully they are waging the war for brand new original concepts, original stories. And it reminds me a little bit of a line that Quentin Tarantino uses sometimes when people would tell him as a young person, like, oh, you'll never be allowed to tell that story, or they'll never allow you to adapt that book, or whatever the case may be. And his answer always was, who the hell are they? I think sometimes it's a little too easy to accept the idea that whether you're talking about Disney or Netflix or Warner Brothers or whomever, that they won't allow filmmakers to be original. I think the filmmakers need to accept some responsibility as well, where they need to come up with cool ideas that are it's so abundantly clear how dramatically compelling they are that the big studios will have no choice but to let them make their shows or make their movies into a reality. And also the audience has to accept some responsibility as well. If the audience only clicks on things that are familiar, things that they've seen a million times before, well, then we bear some responsibility in the lack of originality in showbiz as well. Audience members need to vote with their dollars, and they need to vote with their eyeballs, because whatever you support, well, we're going to get a lot more of that. And if all people do is watch tired rehashes or retreads of familiar concepts that Disney's getting behind, well, that's all we're going to get. But if the audience and the filmmakers and the studios all collectively decide to take a risk every once in a while, you'll get a home run. And it remains to be seen if 1899 will emerge as the clear-cut home run that Dark became. Once again, I think Dark is one of the best shows of the last 10 years, and maybe the best time travel story ever on film or on TV. It's that good. But 1899, it's got my attention, it's got my curiosity, and we'll probably have a year or two before we see a season 2, so there's plenty of time for people to get caught up, get on board, formulate their theories, discuss. So I'll be very curious to hear what people think about the show overall. Did people enjoy it? Were people frustrated? Were people riveted? Were their minds blown? Like, did they give up after episode 1? I'm expecting a wide range of responses to this show. But overall, I think Netflix deserves a huge high five for getting behind this show. And obviously, Janche Frichet and Barenboe Odar deserve a huge high five for cooking it up in the first place. I hope that they will all continue to work together for a very long time. But before I go, I have to bring you a word from Manscaped, the official sponsor of my podcast, Wrong Reel. If you've not checked out Wrong Reel, go do so. It's a podcast devoted to film history, but this holiday season, I'll be giving thanks to our friends over at Manscaped. Everyone loves turkey and stuffing, but you'll be looking like dessert with the help of Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming have blessed you with the ultimate Thanksgiving dinner topic. Tell your in-laws about your new cutting-edge ball trimmer and gift yourself or the man in your life the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Trim your pumpkins by going to manscaped.com and using the discount code WRONGREEL in all caps for free shipping and 20% off. Inside, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner. Toner goes on first, deodorant on second. Performance Boxer briefs, those are my favorite. They're incredibly comfortable. And a travel bag to hold your goodies. Think of it as a cornucopia for your balls. So, sorry I don't have more answers for people. Like I said before, I have a lot of questions, very few answers. I'll think about it a few days, and who knows, maybe if I have some great moment of clarity or revelation, I'll pop back on and say, I've solved the puzzle. Here are all the answers to the show 1899. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. And if you want to talk to me about your theories related to this show, hunt me down on Twitter at Geeking Out. But I can't thank you for watching, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.